Treasures in and around Riggisberg. Switzerland is a very small country, and like a buried treasure chest, it is filled with many jewels. Riggisberg, situated between Bern and Thun, is one of Switzerland's most beautiful treasures and has 2,500 residents. Off the main road, on a topography that can be likened to a saddle, it is a meeting point for weather coming from the four directions. It is the highest point between the Gurbetal Valley lying between Thun and Bern in the east and Schwarzenberg and Freiburg in the west. It is the lowest point between the Swiss Alps in the south and the foothills in the north. Because of this, the weather and the clouds they bring change from hour to hour, displaying their variety and beauty in all seasons. The weather is not the only thing that meets in Riggisberg. Tourists and pilgrims who have passed by on their way to pay homage to Apostle St. James, who is claimed to be buried in Spain, have also met here and left their mark. Old buildings, trees, and boulders dot the landscape like jewels scattered on the ground waiting to be found. Monasteries where the pilgrims stayed to recuperate and churches where they prayed for strength to continue their pilgrimage have survived the ravages of time. So have castles and some buildings where the local privileged lived. Foreign boulders called Erratics have been dropped off by glaciers that have crossed the area millions of years ago. Rudolf von Tafel, born in 1866 and died in 1934, is one of the famous people who have visited Riggisberg and left their mark in the area. He was a well-known writer who wrote in the Bernese dialect. He was born to a wealthy Bernese family. He became a lawyer, a conservative politician, a journalist, a writer, and a poet. He wrote using the local dialect about the local country folk, leaving us colorful pictures of how they lived. Near Riggisberg, there is a memorial to him high above the Gurbetal Valley with a wonderful viewpoint of the Swiss Alps. The Bernese dialect that the locals in Riggisberg speak sounds just as beautiful as the scenery looks. The locals are very proud of their dialect, and many locals challenge foreigners to twist their tongues by attempting to say certain phrases. Just like in English, internal rhymes like lovey-dovey, honey bunny, and sweetie pie are used to convey affection. Bernese dialect uses terms of endearment and diminutive forms to express smallness, making the language sound very poetic and childlike. Just like Y's and IE's are added to English words and names to convey smallness and affection, like doggy and Andy, Le's are added to Swiss German words and names like Hundali and Trudali for the same reason. Bernese dialect, like the many similar Swiss German dialects of other regions, is very melodic compared to the harsh sounding guttural German. Like in Jamaican, where some words are shortened by removing the vowels A, E, I, O, U, and other words are drawn out by adding vowels to them, the language becomes a tongue twister to speak, but a delight to listen to. Like Jamaican, Swiss dialect is mainly a spoken language, and when written as poems and private letters and SMS texts, it is written phonetically. This is because the dialect is very regional and many versions exist. The following phrases demonstrate the difference between German and the Bernese dialect. The following examples are first given in English, then in German, followed by the dialect. Hello, good afternoon. Sometimes we go with someone in a small church 3,016 meters above sea level. On Monday and Tuesday we eat breakfast. Well, something not too expensive. We eat carrots and potatoes, drink white wine or draft beer. Eh? Cheers and God bless. I like to work hard. Shall we sunbathe here or shall we go with the motorbike or by foot 9 to 10 kilometers and play a game? Look, I don't want to be there. Thanks a lot. Can you say kitchen cabinet? I love you.
Guten Tag.
Hallo zusammen, grüß dich.
Manchmal gehen wir mit jemandem in eine kleine Kirche,
Manchmal gehen wir jemandem ins kleine Kirchli,
etwa 3016 Meter über dem Meer.
etwa 3016 Meter über dem Meer.
Am Montag und Dienstag frühstücken wir.
Am Montag und Dienstag tun wir zu Morgen.
Eben etwas nicht zu teures.
Etwas nicht zu teures.
Wir essen Karotten und Kartoffeln, trinken Weißwein oder ein Glas Bier.
Wir essen Rüebli und Herdöpfel, trinken weissen Wein oder eine Stange.
Nicht wahr? Guten Appetit.
Gell? Einen guten.
Ich arbeite gern und arbeite hart.
Ich arbeite und krampfe gern.
Liegen wir an die Sonne hier oder gehen wir mit dem Motorrad
Sünneln wir da oder gehen wir mit dem Töff
oder laufen mit 9 bis 10 Kilometer
oder rennen wir 9 bis 10 Kilometer
und spielen.
und Gameweller.
Siehe, ich will nicht mehr dabei sein.
Ich will einmal nicht mehr dabei sein.
Vielen Dank,
Merci vielmal.
sagt mir einmal Küchenschränklein.
Sag es mal Küchenkästchen.
Ich liebe dich.
Ich habe dich gern.
Over the 900 years life of Riggisberg, many tourists have passed through and admired its beauty. St. James Way, called Jakobsweg, is a network of trails throughout Europe used by pilgrims on their pilgrimage to the grave of Apostle James in Santiago, Spain. They were led to believe that on completion of their pilgrimage, their sins would be forgiven. Many pilgrims who passed through Switzerland used the route referred to as the Upper Route, which started from a settlement at Brunig high above the Lake of Thun. With all-weather hats and fur coats protecting them from cold and rain, and long walking sticks protecting them from threatening animals, they made their way over to Riggisberg Church, built 800 years ago. There they prayed before reaching the renowned monastery at Riggisberg. Built 900 years ago, the monastery at Riggisberg was where the pilgrims who could afford to stay there wined and dined and regained their strength. The monks there were renowned and sought after lumberjacks who cleared the lands around the area of the dense forests and provided settlers cleared fields for farming and timber for building their barns and houses. Once they were mentally and physically recuperated, or their budgets were drained, the pilgrims continued over Freiburg and on to Lake Geneva. At the end of their journey, in the bay not far from Santiago, they looked for shells as proof of their successful completed pilgrimage. The Catholic monastery was abandoned 400 years later during the time of Reformation. It is thought by some that there was a 4-kilometer tunnel going through the limestone rocks that ended in caves through the Pfefferloch found on the cliffs over Kaufdorf. Grasberg. Built 800 years ago on a sandstone outcrop on the Sensee River near Schwarzenberg, the castle served as a private residence of the Grasberg family for 200 years. The family sold it to Bern and Freiburg, which used it as administrative offices for the next 150 years. Because of the high costs of restoration needed for maintenance, it was abandoned and allowed to go to ruin. Schwarzenberg used materials from it for building the city for the next 250 years. For the last 200 years, it has served as a tourist attraction. Riggisberg is the setting of a Romeo and Juliet story that took place in about 1650. Frenely was arranged to marry a rich noble, but fell in love with a poor peasant called Simon Hans Jogeli. The two men had a duel, and the rich one died. Hans Jogeli fled to avoid being charged with murder, and by the time he returned, Frenely had died. Riggisberg Horn is considered a holy hill by a Swiss historian Christoph Feister, who claims that Jesus visited Switzerland and left his mark here in holy hills and their names. It is composed of a huge conglomerate boulder sticking 170 meters above the ground. A wooden stairway leads to the peak, offering a 360-degree panorama view of the area. Nearby, at Hirschmatt, is a house built to look like the houses the Helvetians, a Celtic tribe from the east who populated Switzerland starting about 500 BC, lived in. The Celts left traces of their language as one of the 4 official languages of Switzerland, called Romanisch, a mixture of Celtic and Latin spoken in the southeastern part of Switzerland. Near Hinterfultingen, on the Sense River, are remains of what is considered a Druid temple. Druids were Celtic priests who believed in reincarnation. Riggisberg has a few buildings that are more than 200 years old. Riggisberg Castle was built over 300 years ago. It is presently the administrative office for the handicapped home, which serves 260 mentally handicapped adults accommodated in the buildings surrounding it. The old grain storage house near the secondary school is about 250 years old. The Sonne restaurant, recently renovated, is about 200 years old. It was a hotel that served the military officers from Thun, and before that, 150 years ago, it served as a stopover for the tourists going to the Gornagel Bad Hotel and its hot mineral baths in the Gantrisch Hills nearby. Tourists from all over the world were driven up from Bern by coaches pulled by a team of 5 horses. It was the biggest hotel resort in Switzerland, having 600 beds before it went bankrupt and demolished because of competition from other hotel resorts built higher up in the Swiss Alps. The 900-year-old castle in Rümlingen nearby served as the home for the well-known Madame de Meuron, born in 1882 and died in 1980. She was well known in Riggisberg for her eccentric behavior. She used an ear trumpet, claiming that it allowed her to hear only what she wanted to hear. She would ask strangers if they were somebodies or if they were just employed living from a salary. Whenever she found someone sitting in her reserved place in the church she occasionally attended, she would ask them to leave, claiming that people were only equals with everyone only up in heaven after they die. She locked a woman up in her coach house for 2 days, claiming that the woman was a thief. When authorities told her that she could not do that, she produced a document from the Middle Ages that authorized owners of castles to administer justice on their own without having to go through courts of law. The Abegg residence is only 50 years old, but it was built in the style of an 18th century building. Mr. Abegg was childless, and his residence was turned over to a foundation after his death. The museum next door houses private collections of antique textiles from all over the world. The museum is world-renowned for its capabilities of restoring and conserving historic textile fabrics. There are many old trees in and around Riggisberg. One of the oldest is the 300-year-old, 25-meter-high oak tree on the corner of the road going down to Riggisberg Cemetery from the Riggisberg Hospital. A few erratic boulders that have survived being blasted to pieces for clearing the land for farming and for building roads and houses are now protected. Most of them are off the main roads. Information and pictures to help the interested find them and give them a personal visit is available on the internet.